Well, welcome to the show, everybody. I'm your host, Jack Canfield, and I'm very excited to introduce my next guest today. Coming out of Jackson Hole, Wyoming is Tim Walther. He's the president of Grand Dynamics, and he's an expert in adventure, psychology, and corporate team and leadership development. And today, I'm really excited to talk with Tim about his new book. It's called All In Adventure Stories, The Bold Pursuit of Your Potential. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Thanks for having me, Jack. Really excited. Been a big fan of yours for many, many years and studied your work for many, many years. So thanks for having me.
Well, I'm a big fan of yours now that I've read your book. So it's a mutual admiration society here. So let's start, though, by talking about Grand Dynamics and Jackson Hole. Tell us a little bit about all that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, as you can see in my background here, I'm coming from Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I've lived here for the last 25 years, and my company, Grand Dynamics International, is headquartered out of Jackson Hole. And our primary service is in experiential training and development. And that comes in the form of team building programs, multi-day executive retreats, and customized corporate events. Do a lot of seminars, a lot of speaking, and the common element is adventure. And we love creating adventures and experiences for people, involving some challenge and getting people to work together and really exploring their potential in a very unique way. So we love creating experiences for.
It's great work. I've done some adventure programs and, what do you call it? Outward bound type things. And they've been really transformative for me because you experience something. You're not just hearing about it, thinking about it, but you're learning from your experience. So I love that you're doing that. Now, you've written this book, which I've fallen in love with. Your life has been truly amazing. And you have an interesting way of sharing your insights and your lessons from your adventures. And you've added something called an epic log as opposed to an epilogue. Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the adventure stories, there's 17 adventure stories in the book, and there are various different types of adventures, from rock climbing to ultra running to ski mountaineering, free diving, various different pursuits. And at the end of each chapter, there's something called an epic log, which it combines two words, epic and epilogue, and to create an epilogue or epic log. In the adventure community, people talk about epic experiences, and often those are either really challenging or really unbelievably great, sometimes both. And so the epilogue is often, what happened later, what was the rest of the story. So each of the chapter has an epic log where I talk about what happened later, like what was the rest of the story and what was the reflection, what was the lesson that I learned. And those are some things for the reader to consider, some of the insights that I got from the experiences and what people might consider and how those might apply to their own lives. So yeah, it's fun. It's a fun way to have a little bit of humor and fun and some insight.
Yeah. Now, I have to say, reading about your adventures, and some of them were like pretty hairy, your life on the edge, if you will. Let's share with the viewers a couple of the adventures you write about in your book.
Sure thing. Well, the first opening chapter is about extreme skiing in Jackson Hole. And really that's about the foundation of really where I learned kind of the science of getting into a flow space. Like, what's the edge of your ability? How fast can you go without falling? How big can you go? And really, where does that sweet spot lie where you get into a flow space where your challenge and your ability are right there in sync with each other? And Jackson Hole is known for its extreme skiing. And so that first chapter really kind of explores how I looked at my potential there. And then, of course, anytime you're pushing your limits, there's the potential to have some failure or some challenges. And of course that happened, and how I dealt with that is all part of the story. The second chapter in the book is all about rock climbing and the pursuit of really exploring my potential in that realm. I made a decision to attempt to climb 512, which is a hard grade in rock climbing. And at the time, it was a very, very difficult thing to do. So I decided to implement a very strict regimen and training program with a whole variety of different things that I did to accomplish that. And I went to Thailand to climb some of the most difficult and challenging rock in the world and explore my potential in that way. And along the way, during that journey, I just happened to be there during the Thailand tsunami. And when that happened, everything changed for me, right? My suddenly climbing 512 didn't seem like that important. And things like, how do I raise money to support the orphan children that just lost all their parents in their lives, completely changed my mindset about just being open to using your experience and your potential to actually make a difference in a contribution to the greater good of our planet. So a lot of the unforeseen sort of things that came out of these adventures are all part of the story, right? So the human aspect of how do you deal with loss and even people dying and injuries and things like that are all interwoven into this theme of how do you explore your potential? How do you know when enough is enough? How do you push so you can know what you can do? And a lot of these themes I really love because there's an application and a transference to everyday life, right? And if you can understand how to manage your emotions in an adventure context, then you're going to be able to manage your emotions in a personal relationship or in a business context too. So.
Well, one of the emotions that comes up when you put yourself on the edge, as you did so many times, is fear. How did you, and how do you, in the current present as well, deal with fear when it shows up?
Well, fear is an interesting concept in the adventure setting because it's very tricky to sometimes discern what's a real risk and what's not. And so there's a process, there's a methodology. And actually, part of my book, I outline a series of steps where you can actually go through to analyze what are the elements that actually make up a risky situation. And so by identifying all these different variables that I go through, you're able to eliminate some of the over emotional reactions. That's one thing. And then there's some very specific strategies. Part of the fear is treating it more like a friend than an enemy, right? So fear is there to tell you a signal. It's to tell you to pay attention to something. So it's not something you would want to ignore. When you feel the emotion of fear, you want to pay attention. You want to pay close attention. And what is that fear telling you to pay attention to? When you're in an adventure experience, it's very real. If you're free diving down 100 feet and you're in a blue water hunting and spearfishing environment, and you're keeping your eyes out for sharks or whatever the case might be, or managing how much air you have left on a free dive, that's a very realistic fear to pay attention. And if you can transition that into almost treating fear like your friend, then that friend is going to tell you what to pay attention to and how to keep yourself safe. So there's a whole lot of nuances to it, but those are a few.
Yeah, I always tell people that fear is a caution sign, not necessarily a stop sign, that you have to start paying attention, like when you're merging onto the freeway. So right. I like that. God, I'd love to have you talk about one more adventure. I just really want people to hear one more, if you can do that for us.
One more adventure.
We've been talking about a lot of external adventures. You went to the rainforest and you dealt with ayahuasca. That's more of an internal adventure. Why don't you talk about that?
Sure. Well, I had a dear friend who was living in Jackson, and he got sick. He got very, very sick. And over a course of about a year, he continued to get more and more sick, and no one could really figure out what was going on with him. Ultimately, he thought he was going to be dying, and he reached out to his stepfather, who he had some trauma with, frankly, early on in his childhood, and he forgave his stepfather for the trauma that had happened to him. And it turned out his father was actually practicing some shaman ceremonies in Peru, and invited him to go explore that as an option for healing for this ailment that no one could figure out what was wrong. Sure enough, he went to Peru. He figured out what it was, and the ceremonies that took place in Peru were able to heal him from the sickness that he had. And it just so happened that coincided with the end of the world in on the Mayan calendar, if you remember the whole, I think it was 2012. And so I went to visit him to celebrate kind of him getting over this sickness. And at the same time, dive deep into some of the things that I was exploring from my personal side of healing. And so there is so much trauma in the world that people are holding on to. And everyone has their own thing that they're looking to heal and to move beyond. And I had some too. And so this was a spiritual journey that I was able to use the ceremonies of the ayahuasca to help me to move beyond some of those things that I've been holding on to. So it was quite a transformational experience for me. And there's a little more to the story, obviously, but that's the idea.
No, I've done a few ayahuasca journeys in both Ecuador and Costa Rica, and they've been amazing for me. Stuff I didn't even know was going on inside me came up for healing. So, but it takes some courage to go and be willing to look at all that, as much I think as some of the other things you talk about in your book. So if people want to work with you, because I know your company does some wonderful, adventure experiences that are very profoundly transformational, or they want to find out more about that, about you, perhaps as a speaker, and also your book, where do they go?
Granddynamics.com is where they can find out about the business services, whether it's a team building event, leadership training, a seminar. Do a lot of seminars from YPO groups to personal programming and development. All in Adventure Stories is another website where people will be able to find the book, but you can find it on either one of those websites. And we're going to have some online courses and some interviews with some pretty amazing experts in freediving, in rock climbing, and just different adventure pursuits. And my hope is that people can look at some of these opportunities as not just, it doesn't have to be an extreme pursuit, right? It's not like not everyone wants to go ski the Grand Teton or swim 20 miles across a lakes over a weekend, like some of the stories in my book. But it's really about people just taking that next step into personal exploration of what is possible. And there's lots of different levels to do that. And so hopefully this book will be an inspiration for people to explore that journey a little bit. And they can also tap into some of the experts in these different realms of these adventure pursuits to help people explore whatever might be the most appropriate thing for them. So,
well, thanks for joining us. I really love your book, All in Adventure Stories, The Bold Pursuit of Your Potential. I really encourage people to get this book. I started reading it late at night, and I was upset that I did that because I had to eventually go to bed, which meant I had to stop reading. I didn't want to. There was just the one adventure after another, and it was so well written and so compelling and so insightful, some of the awarenesses you have in the epilogues and so forth. So I really encourage all of you watching this to get that copy of the book for yourself, perhaps someone you love and care about. Could be one of your children, your husband, whatever it might be, and just get the value from it, because there's a lot of value in this book. So thanks for joining us, Tim. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jack. Much appreciated.
My pleasure, my friend. And thanks to all of you for tuning in and watching this week. I'm going to have another wonderful guest next week, so make sure to tune in. I always have guests that are either authors or coaches or transformational leaders who can help you live a more healthy, happy, and productive life. And so have a good time until then, but please make sure to tune in next week. Bye for now.